You ready?
Yeah.
Not that it needs to be any big production or anything, but yeah, I appreciate everybody, whoever we have on the stream here. It looks like we have 12 people in the Zoom call and a number of people on the YouTube chat. So thanks to everybody for joining us for this. It's been a while since we've last done a streaming meetup, and this is really our first time doing a fully streamed meetup where literally everybody is just on the stream. So we realized it was kind of a quick pivot as we had to adjust with the health concerns here in the state, and also we just thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of try our hand at this thing. So yeah, I appreciate you bearing with us, and we may be experiencing some technical difficulties as we go, but that just happens. So I think we have it nailed down, but we'll see. I think just to kind of explain our thought process on this too, we didn't want to contribute to any hysteria around, the coronavirus stuff that is currently spreading. And it was more just an issue where as the weekend went on, the more we talked about it, the more we decided that the risk outweighed the reward of continuing to just have the meetup at Turing. We'll certainly go back to that in the future, but for the time being, this allowed us to test out the streaming stuff and also keep everybody away from transmitting it to each other in case it is out there. And as we know now, the state of Colorado has declared a state of emergency and all these things, and it's just continued to spread. So that was just a risk that we didn't want to take, and I'm sure your employers are looking at doing the same thing. I know mine is. So yeah, happy to have you on the stream nonetheless. And on a happier note, I think we have two great talks for you here. So there were just a few things we wanted to go over before we start with those talks. I already kind of mentioned the health stuff, but the other big thing with this meetup, and it was kind of ironic how it all came together, but we had already lined up Zoom as our sponsor for this meetup, and it just so happened when we decided to go remote only that Michael with Zoom was able to really facilitate all of this and allow us to do this webinar setup. So we're very happy to have Zoom sponsoring the event, and I think they're going to be sponsoring in April as well. So get to know Michael here if you haven't already, and maybe you'll get a chance to meet him in person. He's been at a number of our meetups, and he'll be saying a word here shortly. But in addition to Zoom, we also have Turing. We always have to give them a shout out, and Salt as well, as they allow us to do our thing on meetup.com. So big thank you to those sponsors, and additionally our supporters on Open Collective. I think the top financial contributors list the rankings have since changed, but we still really appreciate all the donations that we've received through Open Collective, and all of our expenses, and really how we handle any transactions through the meetup are all done through Open Collective. So if you're ever interested in that or would like to contribute to the meetup, that's super helpful for us in absorbing, food costs, things like that, should we have a sponsor fall through. So thank you to our supporters there. And then in lieu of our normal hiring routine, we decided if you'd like to post any job position that you're currently hiring for in the live chat, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, we would recommend that you post those job postings on our meetup page. But yeah, feel free to do that in the live chat, whichever you prefer. And I wanted to give an opportunity for anybody who had any announcements. If there are any announcements, feel free to, I guess you could either raise your hand in the Zoom chat or speak up here. We only have a few participants online right now. And then I will also give Michael an opportunity to say something here shortly. But do we have any announcements at the moment? None?
You can just unmute yourself if you do.
What's that? Yeah.
You just go ahead and unmute yourself if you do.
Yeah. I don't think we have any at the moment, but if you want to go ahead, Michael, and just kind of talk about some of the stuff you guys are doing at Zoom, that would be a good time.
Sure. Thanks for having us. Glad that we could provide an alternative option when we needed to come in. So what I wanted to come here today and say is so Zoom is hosting a startup pitch competition. We're looking for new and existing companies who are looking to provide communication products, hopefully leveraging the Zoom APIs and SDKs to, as we like to do, quote, deliver happiness to our users. So if you're building a product that's communication based, whether that be video, phone, chat, we would love to talk. We're providing the opportunity to pitch to Zoom venture capitalists like Emergence Capital and Sequoia for up to $2 million in funding for up to 10 finalists. So startup pitch competition runs between now and the end of March. If you feel like that might be something you're interested in, please let me know. Happy to say as well that we are hiring. We're hiring interns for some chatbot work. We're also hiring for a mobile SDK developer advocate. If you use React Native, if you have some experience with iOS and Swift, and you want to help people solve problems using our mobile SDKs, we'd also love to have you on our team.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Michael. Let's see, do we have any other announcements? I don't think so. Cool. Well, I'm just going to take that as no more announcements, and we'll go ahead and get things started here. Let's see, the first talk of the evening. Very happy to have this presenter back. You probably know him well. We're going to go ahead and welcome Will Klein to do his talk on how to win at interviewing here. So go ahead and take it away, Will.
Cool. Thank you, Sam.
Let's see here if we can. I'm going to unshare my.
Awesome. That'll work. There. All right. Share. Share. Cool. See my slide?
Yep. Looks good.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. Cool. So I am Will Klein. I am a full stack developer at Workday. I work out of Boulder, Colorado. I actually live up in Longmont. And I've been a part of this meetup for a few years now. Great to be here. So today we're going to talk about how to win at interviewing. And I need to start off with a disclaimer. I'm not an interviewing expert, nor do I play one on the internet, but I do have some ideas and some experiences and a hypothesis I'd like to share. It's served me well, and I hope it might help some of you. So the goal of interviewing is typically to get the job. But I've found through many interviews, this has several problems. The first is that it's very stressful. You're trying to get a job. Your livelihood is at stake. You're trying to win over people's approval and convince them that you know what you're talking about, that you're qualified. There's all this stuff that builds into that mental model of that goal of getting the job. The second big challenge with this is ultimately it's beyond our control. It's not up to us that we get the job. Sure, we can do the best we can in the interview, but interviewing is a very imperfect process. It's a proxy for trying to figure out, is this somebody I can work with that's going to do a great job on my team and on my project? It's extremely imperfect. And even with really nice people at really nice places, it's never what we wish it could be. So there's a lot of problems with interviewing, and I can't solve them all right now, but I can focus on what I can control, and we're going to talk about that. Third, it's really stressful. I'm coming back to this. I can't stress that enough. It's something that can rack our nerves. It can raise our blood pressure. It's one of the most stressful things we can go through. And this talk came from these ideas came from, how do I reduce that stress? How do I hack into that and change how I approach interviewing? So let me tell you a story. This is back in 2011. I had been working as a developer for about 5 years, and I was actually trying to figure out, okay, I'm not that good of a developer after 5 years. I've been working at these small places. I really want to find something that's a bit of a stretch for me. I want to work on a big team at a bigger company, at least, with really smart people, really experienced people. I really want to push myself so I can grow a lot faster than I have the previous 5 years. So I took some really challenging interviews. And I remember very distinctly this one technical screen. And it was a phone call with a developer who is somewhat well known in my local area. This was not Colorado. And I'd heard from a friend that, yeah, that person can be a bit brusque. And so I got on the call. I was as ready as I could be. I studied hard on the technical topics that were involved. And I just started getting asked question after question that I didn't know the answer to. I remember one question in particular was, how would I debug a running server process? I had never debugged a server process or even a front-end application going into this. So I was just completely lost, stumbled through the whole thing. And at one point he said, we're done, and then hung up the phone. I was so relieved. That was the worst 10 minutes of my life up until that point. And I was a bit bruised from that. I've had a few interviews like that. So I'm an introvert, and that makes things like interviewing especially challenging. And some of you who are also introverts will identify with this, and anyone else who is not, let this be a window into my world. Talking to people is exhausting. This is a little bit strange because I don't see any of you in person, but talking to people face to face or on the phone is exhausting for me. Talking to strangers is even worse. Talking about code problems is exhausting as well. It's fun, but it's also exhausting thinking about things, wrapping my head around something and trying to figure out what to say. Whew. Thinking about code problems with people who are strangers is terrifying. So I've spent a lot of time thinking, like, I don't want every interview to be like that, and how can I make this better? And bonus chair for doing this over the phone or remotely, which may seem counterintuitive because you're not face to face, but let's just say that those awkward moments are 10 times more awkward when you're not face to face, and you don't have that same empathy when you're sitting across from somebody. Years later, I'm a bit more experienced. I've been a senior engineer for about 5 years now. I'm pretty happy with my experience and my skills. I still freeze up in interviews, getting asked technical questions on a live code or a whiteboard. It's still challenging, and I can't say that that ever goes away, but I found some things that can sort of short circuit that nervous process and change how I think about what's going on in the moment. So how do we diffuse that stress? And how can we regain control of the interview when we ultimately don't have control, but we want to change this for ourselves? So I'd like to present you an idea of just moving the goalposts. Sure, the goal might be to get the job or to have a great candidate nail it in the interview for one person. But if we shift those goalposts to something else, we can control what that outcome is. So our goal doesn't need to be to get the job. What if we could use the interview for learning, for asking questions? Think about it. We're sitting down with developers of different experience levels, some extremely experienced, people who know things that we don't. This could be a golden opportunity to extract knowledge from them, to get ideas from them, to learn what we don't know. And I want to talk about how we can do this so we can have a different type of success in every given interview. So let me tell you another story. Later that week, I got onto another phone interview, and just 5 minutes before the interview, I got the job description from the recruiting partner, and it described 5 years, expert JavaScript. This is 2011, mind you. I don't think anyone had this unless you worked on Gmail. And I was looking it over thinking, I am so not qualified for this. And I called back the recruiter and I tried to cancel. I'm like, we can't do this. Like I got destroyed on another interview like this. I don't want that to happen again. And he said, look, well, you've already, and I actually already had an offer in hand from another company. He's like, look, you already got an offer somewhere else. Don't worry about any reputation here. You're not going to lose face. Just go in and see how it goes. I said, okay, all right, fine. Completely anxious. I get on the call. It's an hour-long phone call. There's the manager, the dev manager, and a senior engineer on the call. And they proceed to ask me JavaScript trivia. Not a tactic I recommend, generally speaking. But they started asking me, what is a closure? What is JavaScript block scoped or function scoped? And at the time, I really didn't know JavaScript. I'd written some jQuery. It was terrible. And I just did the best I could And the best I could do was just be honest. I just said, well, I don't know. They were like, guess. They just kept pushing me for answers. So I say, I don't know. It's block scoped, which it definitely was not block scoped at the time. And they'd say, what is a closure? I think you've used one before. I'm looking at some of your code that, on a jQuery plugin you wrote that I totally slapped together, copy pasta. And I'm like, I really don't know. Can you explain to me what a closure was? And I just stopped trying to answer the question as much as they pushed me to. And I just started flipping around like, I don't know. Let's talk about that. I just asked, well, can you tell me what it is? And when they would respond with explaining, well, a closure is when you have this outside of the function and so on, and this is how scoping works. Well, I'd ask, well, is that how I'd ask about like, oh, well, tell me more about JavaScript scoping. It turned into an hour-long session of a senior engineer teaching me JavaScript. And I got off the call thinking, wow, I totally didn't get that job. But wow, I learned a bunch about JavaScript, a bunch of things I never thought about. And I was really curious to crack into that definitive JavaScript tome that I'd never opened, but I bought off Barnes & Noble. And then I got a call a couple hours later, and they offered me the role, which is a contract to perm role, which is fairly low risk for them. But they were going to bring me in and have me on site and pay me 50% more than what I was making at my last job. And I was just, I was flabbergasted. And I rolled into that job a couple months later. We finally got everything sorted. 2 months of stressing and hitting the books. I rolled into that job still not knowing what JavaScript was because I didn't really have a real project to work on. I still didn't have mentorship. And I remember that first day, a different engineer, the lead dev on the project, came over to me. And he said, hey, Will, this person that you're sitting next to, starting the same day as me, it's like, he really impressed me in the interview. Follow along with him and you'll do fine. And I just like, okay, I'll just copy everything he does, mimic him, and maybe I'll be able to get by as an imposter and they won't let me go right away. And maybe I'll have enough time to figure things out. And maybe I'll learn just a little bit more before I'm cut loose. I went back to that, that lead dev just today, a couple hours ago. And I said, hey, why did you say that to me? Like, what, can you give me more context for why you brought me in the first place? Like, why did your team take such a chance on me? Your colleague knew I didn't know JavaScript. And he told me that I was hired more for enthusiasm and desire to learn than for any of my skills. And I've been in so many interviews since then on both sides of the table. And I'm thinking more now from the point of view of giving interviews. And I've seen so many people do that same type of approach of like honesty and asking questions and showing that they don't know something, but they're honestly curious to find out the answer. And those questions, those Q&As turn into dialogues and conversations. And it stuck out to me every single time over the years that that's more impressive than anything to me. When somebody is honest about what they know and what they don't know, and when they share very honestly what they are curious about, that's impressive to me. So fast forward a little bit now. 5 years, well, I've been working with JavaScript for a long time. I did a couple other jobs for a couple of years that I wasn't so good at. And I started interviewing again. I've got sort of one more interviewing story. And I was interviewing at a big tech company that was doing an Electron app. And it was a company that I was actually afraid to apply at for years. But at this point, I was like, wait, why am I so afraid to get told no? Like, what's the worst that could happen? I'm going to go in and see what I can learn. And I went in and did a live code on the phone with them over Zoom, actually. And I remember just running up against the edge of my expertise. Sure, I knew JavaScript, but I didn't know Node very well. I didn't know anything about Electron. And I remember things with Node and buffers really being like something I never worked with before, and it was essential to the problem we were working on. So I let them know, like when I was struggling, I asked them, what is it I'm struggling with? And they're like, well, this is how buffers work. And we just got into it. And I just didn't worry about getting the job. But then I got to learn a bunch about Node, got to learn about buffers on the interview with two very experienced engineers. And I even asked them, like, if I came back here in a year from now, what should I know beyond this? What else might I be missing? And where can I go for that information? What do you think I should do to practice? And I got some really awesome mentorship in that interview that I may yet in the future use if I ever want to get into a project like that. So I'm not sure if my slides are advancing. There they are. Okay, so one last thing I want to talk about. Sorry, these are some blank slides. But one last thing I wanted to point out is this isn't just about being the candidate in an interview. Every one of us is going to get to give the technical interview at some point if we haven't already. And I would encourage you to use those chances to learn from the candidates as well. It doesn't matter if they're experienced or even just getting started. I've learned amazing things from people who are fresh out of school and or are completely self-taught or just walking into their first tech interview. There's something amazing to learn from everyone. Always assume that. And your job in the interview is to extract that. So I want to circle back to the idea of just move the goalposts. It doesn't have to always be about making sure that you're the best candidate or proving yourself or getting the job. If we reframe this, it's a bit of a mental hack, but it's worked really well for me into, well, hopefully I get this, but one thing I can definitely control is I can make sure that I learned something today. And if that's our goal, I don't see how we can possibly lose. I hope this was helpful. If you ever want to talk about interviewing best practices from either side of the table, hit me up on Twitter or email. We can all win at the interview every time. Ask questions, be curious, and learn. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Great work. Did you want to field any questions, Will? Or
Yeah. Are you able to see the chats, or if anybody wants to unmute and speak up, I'd welcome it.
Let's see. We do have one question in the chat. It's more general, like related to learning backend, and I guess maybe you might have some words of advice on that as it relates to interviewing or just learning from an interview, like you were saying. So yeah, Jared Fontaine said, I really need help learning backend. Any advice for him?
I get it. I mean, be honest about what you're learning. Be honest about what you're studying. I mean, I think those are things that I look for when I'm interviewing for full stack. I'm on a full stack team. We're actually interviewing right now, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people coming in that haven't worked on the back end. They don't have professional experience, but I'm curious, what are they studying? What are they learning? What do they know already? And I'm not concerned with them sharing like all this expertise, because it's not going to be there and it's going to be very different. I'm more interested in where are they coming from and are they honest about that? Some places might be looking for like, you already have those skills. Don't worry about that. There's going to be a lot of places that are just going to be, and I think there's a lot of places like this that hire in a more general way. They're looking for generally good software developers, people who have worked on some problem in the past. Maybe they worked on video games, or they worked on non-web stuff. Maybe they work on robots, and now they want to build, now they want to figure out how to build things in Python on the back end or Node or whatever. And that's fine. I think I don't have any advice beyond that. I got the huge benefit of just learning on the job. But I'd say look for a place like that. Look for a place that's looking for that has some crossover. If you already know front end, for example, looking for a full stack team where you can say, hey, I can represent my front end skills and I'm really learning the back end stuff and I'm looking for help with that. I'm looking for experience. People are going to be receptive to that. That's what I found 2 years ago. I'd been working on nothing but front end for 8 years. All my back end skills had pretty much dried up, and which wasn't very good in the first place. And I got to learn on the job. So that's all I can offer. But if you want to talk more, hit me up on Twitter. Anything else, Sam?
Let's see, nothing more on there at the moment. I was curious, excuse me. So you've interviewed me, and I will say that you, from the other side of the table, you gave a very, I really appreciated your interviewing style a lot. And that is something at my job currently where I've spent a lot of time, conducting interviews myself and sitting on the other side of the table. Curious what kind of advice you have for actually conducting interviews, and if there are any go-to resources, because it's really difficult from both angles, right? I think it's super tough to conduct a strong interview and make a candidate feel welcomed even though they may not match the skill sets you're looking for. Yeah, curious as to any advice you have there.
I really appreciate you asking that. The resource I would look to is your own experiences. I think we've all been in interviews that were uncomfortable, that were challenging, where we were made to feel uncomfortable, not intentionally, maybe intentionally, hopefully not intentionally, but we've all been in that those different situations. And the more of those we've had, I think the better we are going to be at giving those interviews. Because my goal in every interview is to make the candidate as successful as possible. And that means making them comfortable, making sure that they've had a break, making sure that they can get some water to drink, they need coffee, they need to step outside and go for a walk if it's possible. All of those things are extremely valuable. So just be empathetic and think, well, what has this person been through? And what point of the day is this? And think about all the ways to help them be successful. If they stumble, help them along. If it's a live code or a pairing interview, actually pair with them, get them rolling on that interview. If it's whiteboard, same thing, start moving things along and give them opportunities to jump in. You want to help you want to learn from them, right? So see what you can get out of them. And it usually means just being welcoming and being encouraging, being positive, and remembering those situations that you're in and trying to get better.
Awesome, thank you. Looks like we do have a handful of questions that just came in, and I think Raheem, do you have a question for Will here?
Yeah, I actually, I don't get this interview question very often, but every once, I mean, maybe like twice in my lifetime, question about big O notations and stuff like that. How do you, I still don't know how to answer that question very well, or care to remember how to answer it or memorize it and ace that question. How do you suggest handling that type of questions if you're really not in, do you memorize it and answer it, or you just say, I don't know? Can you tell me? Is that the strategy?
Yeah, so I remember trying to study things for interviews, and I don't know it's a bad idea to study. I've stopped doing that. I realized that most of what I know going into an interview is going to come from what I already know before I set up that interview. And maybe I'll like brush up on something. I don't think that's a bad idea. Or to practice mock interviews, with friends and such. But I am never like memorizing anything. I'm never preparing remarks. I think because you're going to have a hard time recalling what that is. It could be non-technical. It could be like, well, why are you here? Why are you interested in this company? And if you try to remember what you rehearsed 5 minutes ago or an hour ago or the night before, for me, it's extremely hit or miss. So I'm just as honest as I can be. And I try to just, and this takes, I think there is some practice that develops of thinking on your feet and being more ad hoc. And some of this is relaxing a bit. I think when we relax and we're talking with friends, it's so much easier. We go into an interview, we just lock up, everything kind of freezes. But when we stop thinking, well, I need this job, or I really want this job, and it's hard, believe me, it's hard. But the more we can let go of that and think, well, hey, maybe I'm not going to get this. What can I learn? I'm going to ask. I'm going to do what you suggested. I'm going to say, I'm not sure. I'm not thinking. I'll even outright say, like, I'm actually having trouble right now. I did that in live code for the job I'm in now, where I was starting to live code. I'm like, I'm freezing up right now. I know how to do this, but right now, I'm just going to be honest, right at this moment, I'm just freezing up. And the interviewers helped me along, and they helped me get rolling. So I think that honestly can only help you.
Cool.
Question?
Yeah, we have a handful of questions here. Maybe we could just take a few more for the sake of time. But Diana looks like she had a question relating to anxiety disorder. How would you recommend for somebody who has an anxiety disorder that they address it in an interview?
So I'm not a doctor. I've learned a lot actually from my wife and her working with doctors. And well, one thing I've used a lot is breathing, deep breathing, things like meditation, but basically taking lots of deep breaths. My wife actually taught me something before I went on stage at a conference recently. She actually told me to get down and do 10 push-ups. And I did that, and it got the blood flowing. That helped for me. Again, like, I don't know that this speaks to an anxiety disorder, but these are things that have helped me. I don't have an anxiety disorder as far as I know. I'm in diagnosis with one. I do get anxious in different situations. I've experienced it. But anything you can do to get that blood flowing, breathing, I would see a professional. I would see somebody who's a therapist, and I've gone to therapists and learned a lot of really valuable things from them, because there's some amazing healthcare professionals that can teach you techniques. I would look into dialectical behavioral therapy. It's something that my wife has transferred a lot of ideas to me for, and it's extremely effective for short-circuiting that anxiety and having a very reliable tool set that you can reach to and apply step by step as you're experiencing those things. But again, I'm not a doctor, so fine one.
Awesome. And then I think we should probably just take one more question here. There's still a few more in the chat, but this question from Blake is, what are some good questions that you can ask during an interview to get a good feel for a company? Which I think is a really good one.
I usually try to dig into the personal experience of the people on the team. I'm looking for that at different points in the interview, and sometimes it comes in the form of questions. It could be, why are you still here after 5 years? Or what's the favorite thing that you've experienced here? Or tell me about something that was really challenging about working here and how that went. And you get to see people get a little more personal. Those are hard questions, but it opens up, potentially hard questions, but it opens up the door for those things. Another part of the interview that was extremely valuable to me, and I would try to see it if you can, is when you get to see the whole team together. I got to see it in the lunch interview for my current team. And actually, my current company was like number 4 on my list when I was interviewing. And I remember at that moment when I got to go to the lunch interview and I saw the whole team sitting together, and they weren't trying to like interview me. They're just hanging out with each other. And I just got to see how they interact with each other. It became really clear to me that this was a team I wanted to be on. So I don't know all the ways to get that, but that's what I'm looking for in an interview. Is like, I want to know who these people are. I want to know what they're like working together. And the other thing I would recommend is, aside from focusing on what's the team dynamic, focus on the manager and really interview the manager that you would have, because they're a very important person in your career and your time there. They're going to make you successful or not successful. They can help you be successful even when you're not successful. They can be an amazing person to be with and a great part of your career. So make sure that you feel like that's somebody that you could eventually trust, that you could build a relationship with, and be honest with.
Awesome.
Cool.
I think that probably covers it. Oh, did I lose you guys here?
I stopped the share.
Oh, that's what happened. Cool. Well, I think that's great. Thank you for addressing those questions well. And we can probably move on. So great talk. Appreciate it very much. Now, while we're in kind of between talks here, I think we could probably take maybe just a minute break, let Steve kind of share his screen here and set up. Yeah, we'll be back shortly if you just want to grab a drink or use the restroom, whatever you need to do. We'll be back shortly. And Steve, how are you coming along? Got everything on your end?
Oh, we're about to find out.
Yeah, we are. Cool. Well, feel free to stream that whenever you're ready. I'm just going to step away real quick and I will be right back.
Yeah, apparently I have to quit Zoom and rejoin it. So hold on.
Oh, so what I just said is also recorded.
Oh yeah.
It's on the internet.
Oh no.
You're fine.
As on our break, I'm gonna talk about big O notation.
Okay. Yeah, can somebody explain to me how can I get a job with big O notation?
Well, all right. So there's 2 types of people that ask questions about big O notation.
Okay.
The first type of people are people just want to make sure you're not going to put a for loop in a for loop in a for loop in the code base, right? Which, as long as you like talk through your thinking process, you're fine. The second group of people are monsters, and for them, what you do is the answer is always one of 2 answers. It's either log n or n log n. So if you slur the first n in your answer and you just like log n, you're almost got it right every time.
Nice.
Done.
So slurring is good. So
yeah,
you're
I mean, intentional slurring. If you walk into the interview slurring, it's probably not good.
But when doing that interview question, that particular
Like,
one.
just a little, especially if it's a phone interview, just oh, I think it's log in, right? Just enough possible deniability there will usually get you through that question.
Okay, good tip.
Yeah, especially with the phone recruiters for like Google or Facebook or somebody who are they're just sitting there going through the list of questions. That's usually good enough to get you past the gatekeeper, right? Like, because they don't know the answer to the question.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Steve, while we have you, might as well get things going here. But for those of you who don't already know Steve, he has been a longtime staple here in the Denver community and in the React community at large, I should say. He's spoken many times here at React Denver and also runs Dinosaur.js, a conference here in Denver that takes place every summer. So I would love to welcome back Steve here and go ahead and take it away, Steve.
All right. So we're talking about building your own custom render in React. Sam did a good job, but I have a slide, so here it is. Cool. So yeah, my name is Steve. I work at a little company called Twilio, where I am the front-end architect and senior principal engineer. Wrote a book. I did a front-end master's course on React State that you all should watch because I like worked really hard on it, and so like it'd be great. Mostly just for my ego more than anything else. And if we were at Turing, I would have mentioned that I started the front-end program there, but we're not there, so it's fine. Cool. And then like I took a break from social media, so like you can set like the organizers will tell you how hard I am to talk to on DMs as it is, but feel free to slide in there, and when I occasionally check I will. But yeah, you know when you say you're doing a detox and then like you totally do it for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then like weeks 4 and 5 you're still checking a little bit. That's my current status. But yeah. All right, so we're gonna talk about your own custom renderer, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means in a second. But first, we'll just kind of talk about what are the high-level goals, right? Like, you know, we've called React DOM.render, or you've used React Native, or maybe you've been super fancy and used like React PDF or some other crazy thing. And that, you know, you'll be like, all right, neat. I understand that like I used to be able to just use React, and now I have to use React DOM.render, but I don't really understand why. So we'll take some of the mystery out of that. We'll talk about like, this is honestly a short talk. Like, are we gonna rewrite all of React DOM in 25 minutes together? We're not. But we'll kind of do the kind of like hand wavy kind of tour de force to like help at least like clear away some of the mystery and show you that like, you know, you could dig in and do your own kind of custom stuff. And then like that also exposes like what is actually happening in the real thing as well, right? Okay, like neat, this magic stuff is happening, but by even seeing just a little bit and re-implementing a little teeny piece of it, becomes a lot easier to understand what's happening normally as well. And it's like, it's super good to understand the tools that we're using sometimes. I mean, yeah, I don't actually understand how electrons going through a copper wire do that little genie effect in Mac OS when I minimize a window, but I'm sure it has to do with ones and zeros. But yeah, just getting a little bit further down the stack sometimes is helpful. So, you know, one of the things about React is that there is a lot in React these days, right? What was started as a simple view layer library, not a framework, quote unquote, was a big thing in 2013. Has a lot of things. It's got, you know, the components that you write to make your application, props and state, hooks, the context API, effects and lifecycle methods. It's got like stuff like ref to actually access the DOM, and key to keep track of like that list, and if you resort it, like what it has to re-render. The idea to like lazy load stuff, error boundaries, so a uncaught error doesn't blow up your entire application, concurrent mode and suspense, all sorts of fancy stuff that we all only kind of understand. You know, it doesn't include any way to actually make a like full state management, or, you know, a router that doesn't change its APIs every week. But other than that, you know, it's got a lot in it. But the one that we know that these days React targets a lot of things, right? React DOM is the kind of like first and foremost. React Native to target iOS and Android. React Native DOM, which is what Twitter Lite is built in. And what that is so like, follow me with this one. React DOM, all right, cool. Like, makes sense. We're gonna, you know, like manipulate the DOM with React. React Native, cool. It's React for iPhone and Android. Neat. React Native DOM is if you took React Native and ported it back to the DOM, right? It's basically, I like React, but hate the web. That's a stance. React TV, React PDF. There's actually React Fermata, which will like let you control Arduinos with React. And so this idea, like all that stuff, like state management, props, all that kind of fun stuff, that's all like core React. That's shared across all of these. How actually, whether or not we're rendering DOM nodes or making UI views in iOS or blinking LEDs in on an Arduino, like that is the only core difference between all these implementations of React. So you've got React, which is all of the kind of states and props management along those lines, and then you have like based on all of that, like what do we do to show it, right? And for me, a lot of this started out with I work, so Twilio, like before I worked at Twilio, I worked at SendGrid, which was acquired by Twilio. And I used to work on a fancy pants HTML email renderer, right? As drag and drop, you did all that kind of fun stuff. And one of the things, like we all joke about our good friend IE6, right? Outlook doesn't use IE's rendering engine. It uses Microsoft Words, right? And there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff in there. I think I have a slide on it. If not, we'll talk about it in a second. There's a whole bunch of crazy stuff in there. Like we have to do these like conditional comments. At the time when we were writing the previous version, that's now the legacy version, you know, like React 15 at the time dropped deprecated HTML attributes, right? So BG color and stuff like that were not supported. And like React would be like, I don't like, please, that's like HTML3, we don't deal with that, right? But in the world of HTML email, like I very much needed to deal with that. I needed to do weird stuff with comments, right? And all sorts of craziness. And so that's around the time I was looking into a lot of this. Now React 16 is a little more forgiving with this. It'll support all of those deprecated attributes. It'll pass anything through. But it started out with that kind of like, okay, like HTML email is somewhat different than HTML. And there are some existing libraries. And that's what kind of started me down this path. And so originally when I promised Will and Sam that I was gonna do this talk, I'm like, I'm gonna do a really weird one. And the problem is all the dry runs, the really weird one had to do more with the like eccentricities of the Canvas API than it did actually the React renderer. So we're actually gonna do something closer to React DOM. That way we can all like deal with the APIs we know and love already. But obviously an overly simple version, one that you can stand to watch me live code. Because like watching someone live code is fun for like 10 minutes. Around hour 6, it gets a little brutal. So we're gonna do the kind of like overly simplistic version, just to, you know, accomplish those goals at the very end. So one of the things that the React team did, I want to say 2017, was they released this reconciler, right? So reconciliation is the process of taking your React components and figuring out like what does that mean for the DOM or whatever end result platform that you're looking at. So they took out the kind of core mechanism of that and released it as an NPM package. Now, even to this day, in the year 2020, that is still something where it is like experimental. It's kind of like the context API was for a really long time until it wasn't anymore, which is kind of a use at your own risk kind of thing, but still interesting, like to kind of work on projects with it. So as long as you're willing to maintain, like, you know, like it's not going to go with maybe like, I have not seen too many breaking changes in my experience, but like, I don't know what the semantic version is on it, to be honest, right? Like a thing could change, you will have to fix it. It's not going to be as stable as React. And that's fair, right? It is kind of implementation detail that was kind of exposed out to us. So there have been 2 reconcilers in the history of React. There was the stack reconciler, which is React 15 and earlier. You know, that sounds like a lot until we remember that there was no React 1 through 14. So, you know, 0.1 through 0.14 and React 15. And then we've got the fiber reconciler, which is the kind of new fancy one, which was like it came with React 16 and hopefully you never noticed, right? Everything was better and it laid the groundwork for suspense and all sorts of other stuff like that. But it is kind of the latest and greatest. It's the one that you probably use every day as long as you're using React 16, right? All right. And with the fiber reconciler, there's 2 modes. There's mutation mode and persistent mode. Persistent mode treats the, the kind of tree of nodes as a big immutable object. That will one day maybe be used with React Native. That is the goal. Mutation mode, because as much as we all love our functional programming, the DOM is a big mutable object, right? So mutation mode is like we are actually changing the DOM based on React rendering. So we're going to be playing around with the fiber reconciler, and we're going to be using it in mutation mode. The real world examples that are kind of like officially supported by Facebook are React Art, which lets you do pretty art. React DOM, which is probably the one that most people use, and React Native, which is targeting the native Android and iOS platforms. And you can actually see the configurations that they use because React is obviously open source. And I will share these slides. They're in the GitHub repo. I'm going to show you momentarily. Oh, there it is. So what I'm going to do is going to do a kind of like very high level version of implementing a simplified React DOM. And with that, like in there, the slides will be there as well as the walkthrough as well. And like any good live coding software engineer, should this go poorly, you ever watch a cooking show on TV where they like make the beef stroganoff and then they go to commercial break and they pull it out of the oven because there's like one that they already made? So if this goes real poorly, we'll switch over to a implemented version and take it for a spin. But here it is. Cool. So I will switch over to Chrome real quick so we can take a look at it. And it's, it's like a to-do app, except I can't mark stuff done. So like nothing special. I tried to make a pun or like a play on words with Penis and reconciler, and it just wasn't that funny. So there's no actual like, we're not like gonna lay on the theme too much because renaming Git repos was more work than I wanted to do, and the joke wasn't that funny. All right, so cool, there it is. I've got an input field. This is using, if we look at the code right now, we've got just React DOM as we know it and love it, and it's rendering it, right? We can look at the code real quick, but there's nothing all that fancy in there. There's an application component that keeps an array of things and a little form for adding a new one in there, right? Nothing special, nothing all that cool. But there it is for us if we need it. What we want to do is we want to rip out React DOM.render and replace it with our own, which is going to go real poorly at first. And then should I do my job correctly, we'll either come together or I will pull one out of the easy bake oven and we will talk about it and we'll see which way it goes. So here's kind of the beginning of my reconciler. So we've got this host config. Now the host platform, when we think about host components, right? The components you write every day are, custom components. They're either class-based components or function components or like what have you. The host config is stuff like if you're writing for React DOM, it's like an H1 or like an A tag. If it is React Native, it's a text or a view. If it's React PDF, it's whatever React PDF uses. It's never been the day that I want to like make PDFs. But that is the thing we've had to do at Twilio SendGrid, which is we have email insights or expert insights for emails, which are HTML reports generated out of React. So we use it. I just managed to dodge the bullet on that one and not have to do it. Cool. So host config is just a bunch of methods that we're going to have to implement, like some subset of them, right? That kind of tells React Reconciler what to do to take React, the common part shared across all these platforms, and React, in this case, not React DOM, as you can see, to tell how to actually render that to the web, right? And we gave it a render method. The only reason we needed to give it a render method was to have a API that was at least somewhat similar to React DOM, right? And so, as you know, React DOM takes the whatever the root component is and where you want to put it on the page. React DOM has always taken a third argument, which is a callback that I've never used. Like, has anyone used it? You can do a raise your hand thing here or something. But I don't know. I haven't. So we, the other parts are we create a container from that root element. If you're wondering what these two falses are, let's see if Visual Studio Code will help me here. There is the is concurrent mode and the hydrate for server-side rendering and stuff along those lines. We don't care about that, so we're just going to say false. And once we have that container, we will, put the first component in there into the container, and the null are, looks like the callback and I don't know, parent component. Cool. So that kind of gets us started. Now this is going to blow up spectacularly when I pop it in, right? And that's to be expected because right now it shouldn't be lost on you that my reconciler, it doesn't do anything, right? Cool. So let's actually go and swap that in. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take out, we'll do the index, we'll take out React DOM, and we will import not React DOM from Fender. That would have been fun. I should also note that I'm typing on a keyboard that has no labels on it, just to make it extra fun. And we'll put that in there. Cool. And we'll go over, and as you can see, it's like get root host context is not a function, right? There's some internal methods is hoping that host config object has, that it doesn't. So I will kind of go and show you real quick. If I go into the README, you can see it. This is where the cheat sheet for my live coding is, as you can see. So these are the kind of mandatory, you need to have methods in there. Now, support mutation is kind of important because that's the one that puts us into either mutation mode or persistent mode. But a lot of these will be somewhat self-explanatory, right? We don't care. We're not going to care about all of them today. We're just going to care mostly about create instance, create text instance. So create instance is the DOM node. Create text instance is how you create a text node, because that is a different API in the DOM than just making an H1 element. You have to actually do document.create text node. We're going to have the ability to, append an child, append child to a container. A lot of the normal DOM ones, you'll see some additional ones beyond that in here as well. So I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to pop it in right here. Cool. And so now I probably get nothing, right? And the idea that I get nothing is not super shocking, right? Because my code doesn't do anything. So no one's super surprised here, but that kind of makes sense. The one that we want to look at first is this kind of create instance, right? So these are going to be okay, we need to create some DOM nodes. That seems really great. And so this takes a few arguments. There is type, and type is going to be what kind? Is it H1? Is it an A tag? So on and so forth. Props is going to be the props handle the component. There are 2 or 3 more that we're not going to use. We've got root container instance, host context instance. It's great. It's going to go great. Host context. And internal instance handle, right? And we don't need any of these today. Internal instance, but I'll leave them in here for a second. Hold on. And talking and typing is hard. All right, cool. And what I want to do just for the beginners, for beginning, right? And I'm a beginner here too. We'll do console log. And cool. And I'm going to take out those parentheses. And this way we'll actually at least see in the console what happens as it goes down. Just to show you the application.js again, we're going to have a main tag, an H1, this kind of form, along with a list of things in this case. So if I open this up, you can see that I've got a bunch of objects that kind of get console logged. You can see the first one, we've got the type H1, the props, which case we've got a string here. The root container instance, that's where we mounted it to begin with, and some other fun things that help you do the really kind of more advanced stuff. You can see we've got input with the type of submit. We've got input text input. These are and you'll notice that we don't have any of the function components because any of those function components just go boil down to until we get to the host components at the very end of the day. Right, because the actual function or class-based components, React will handle just in regular React. It only comes down to no, I need to put stuff on the screen. How is it that I go ahead and put stuff on the screen? So your main is obviously the first one. We're kind of doing it in reverse here. So we're navigating from the bottom of the tree on up. All right. So we're console logging all of that, and we're kind of good to go. It would be nice if we can put some stuff onto the page. So we'll kind of do the simplest possible thing to begin with here. We're going to get rid of that console log. And we're just going to use the regular DOM API in this case. So we'll just say element equals document.create element of the given type. So an H1 or main. And then we're going to return that element so the rest of our methods can use it. Cool. All right. So, all right. We'll go along with that for a little bit. Like nothing's going to work just yet. And that's all right. But got that in place. All right. So we've got those create instances. And actually, I'm pretty sure that if you look at the page, nope, nothing in there yet. All right. So I got to figure that out in a second. But like, even if there is, like, we wouldn't have any of the actual text nodes in there yet. So there's not a lot to see in there so far. We will do something similar for the text nodes, which is in here, we'll just get the text and we'll say document.create text node. And this is gonna be the text. And just because it's my own custom renderer, we're gonna yell everything. Just to show that this is our own version of this. All right, cool. And I'm interested, I'm gonna do a console log of the text just to see if this is all actually working the way I expect. But we got the console. All right, so we've got the actual text node in there as well. So we're working through the renderer, but we're not putting everything on the page just yet. And we'll see why momentarily. So we are creating these elements, but if you've ever used the kind of like normal, just regular DOM, or even just jQuery, honestly, to be that, for instance, like making DOM elements in memory does not put them onto the page, right? Because if you think about it, like one of the things that makes React fast is that we're able to do a whole bunch of stuff in memory. And once we've figured out the best possible way that we're going to commit it to the page, then we can go ahead and like run that virtual DOM, like kind of different algorithm to figure it all out. So you look, we've got this, append initial child, we've got a few other ones. We've got the ability to put items onto the page, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of pulling it out of the oven here because this is pretty straightforward and my live coding typing has been great so far, which is just using native DOM APIs, right? So append child to container takes the container and the child and calls the native DOM API. Append child takes a parent component and a child component, and the append the initial child worked as well. So now we have the ability to create the elements and we've got the ability to put them onto the page, right? And you can see that some of this works. Now, you'll notice that my submit button is a text input field because it didn't get that type submit passed to it. None of my attributes are going through there. No class names or anything along those lines. I'm just getting the kind of straightforward, just DOM nodes, and none of those props are getting applied as attributes. So we're gonna have to figure that out next as well. And again, like you might want to whitelist or blacklist or do special things like style props are going to be handled differently than the regular like HTML attributes, right? You might want to normalize some of them. There's all sorts of stuff that you want to do. I'm going to keep in spirit of the HTML email where anything goes. And we're just going to say, hey, go through all of the props because the prop was an object with the kind of key and value. Go through all of them and skip children, because children is the one where we're going down the tree. Skip the children, and otherwise, if it's a href, apply it to the element. If it's a image source, apply it to the element, right? Like obviously a like real version of this will be a little bit more sophisticated, but like we're just gonna say take all the props and apply them as attributes to the element, right? And now you can see I've got my submit button. I've got any class names, and that's why if you've ever been angry that React does not support, though it does these days, but like back in the day, React didn't let you do class and made you do class name as the attribute. That's because the element, it's element.className. That's effectively what's happening in here, right? It's calling the native DOM APIs, and whatever element.class was not the native DOM API, right? And so you can do a bunch of other stuff like one of the things I'll kind of show you from my notes over here is one of the things that I needed to do was actually put in these weird Microsoft Outlook comments, right? And put them into the DOM. Now React, you can comment in JSX, but it doesn't actually like maintain those comments into the DOM itself, right? And so one thing you can do is you can go ahead and like create a comment node and put them on there as well. So I could do something like const comment equals document create comment. Cool. And we'll say, oh my, we'll say element dot append child. I don't know why I didn't just type on my MacBook keyboard today. I'll put the comment in there. Cool. And let's go take a look at the DOM here. And if I go in, you can see main, the first child of main is this comment. The first child of the H1 is a comment. I'm actually changing like every single DOM node as it renders and adding that comment in there as well, right? So you can do whatever you want in here and kind of go off the beaten path if you need to as well. So we've got like, we're almost like forgetting it to the point where it was before. We're pretty good. The only thing that we're missing right now is we don't have any idea of like on change or on submit, which are the two that we need for this. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You know, obviously we're all very cool. And I understand that because we are cool, we are using function components and we are using, hooks, right? And hooks aren't even the problem. It's function components, because if you look at like a function component, right? You take this handle submit, for instance, or even handle change, right? And if you add an event listener now, it's gonna grab bad thing as it was like in that first render of the function, and it's gonna bind it as an event listener, which means it'll always be the first thing. If you were using a class-based component and you had to put this everywhere, well, then it would have been a dynamic binding and everything we're about to do would have been easier, right? So some of the, you know, the hard part of what we're about to do is not React's fault, it's JavaScript's fault, it's React's fault. It's like, it's basically the way JavaScript works is bad thing has a value, it's a string, which, you know, we pass by value instead of reference in this case. So it'll always be, if we just bind this event listener as it is, it'll always be what it was on the first render, which is not going to be what we want as we continue to re-render this. So the easiest hack that we can do in this case is to every time the prop of value changes, we'll take off the old event listener and we'll put on the new event listener. Now, could we get more clever with like keeping some in-memory references inside of a closure and doing all of that? Yeah, we totally could. And all of your eyes would bleed out of the eye socket as I tried to live code that in front of you. So we're not gonna do that. What we're gonna do is just, you know, because this is a tiny little version, we're gonna take this little hack right here that I will explain as soon as I put it into the page. All right, and here it is. Here's my new add event listener, which is going to just put a property on that element where I'm gonna keep track of a given event listener. And I'll go remove one if there's on there, and I'll add the new one in that case. So I'm just gonna kind of keep the most, so as our state changes, a new prop comes in, I'm just gonna swap out the event listeners, right? Is it the most performant thing in the world? No. Is it what React DOM does under the hood? Absolutely not. Is it 4 lines of code? Yes. Right. So given those trade-offs, which I am okay making at this point, we're gonna go ahead with that as well. So we're going to change our code here just a little bit because we have 2 types of props. We have the things that we want to pass directly to an attribute, and we have these we've got these kind of on change, on submit, and stuff along those lines that we are going to want to actually add as event listeners. So because of that, we're just going to get a little bit more clever here because who doesn't like getting clever in their code? And I'll pop this in and then I'll explain it. Cool. So object.entries takes an object and gives you an array of arrays where it's key and value. So prop and value in this case. If that prop is children, like we're ignoring children, right? Like we're not, both my child has appeared in the Zoom link and Will's child is here now too. We're clearly not ignoring children, but we're ignoring React children in this case. If it is a string value, cool, we'll do that same attribute passing through that we did before. And if it is on submit or on change, we're gonna add either a submit or a key up because I was lazy, event listener there as well. Now, clearly we are not dealing with on click and I'll leave those as an exercise to the reader. We're just doing what we need to get this working again, right? So if it is a string, pass it through as an attribute. If it is, and we could have probably if we didn't need the what kind of event we wanted to listen for, then we could probably write a better abstraction here, but this will work since we only have 2 onto the page. Cool. So let's go ahead and we're gonna see. This is if I'm remembering this correctly, this is not gonna go well. All right, so the change, we get this remove child from container is not a function because there is some changing and swapping out stuff. Now, for the change to input field, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't totally know why it's breaking at this moment, but eventually deciding what's gonna be on and we put stuff on the page, but there's a chance we're going to need to update things. And there is a chance that we are also going to want to take things off the page. I think that is all completely reasonable as well. So I'm going to pull some more methods out of the easy bake oven here. And we've got remove child from container, which is again, just the same exercise that we did before. It's just more of that DOM manipulation. Obviously different if you're drawing to canvas or if you're doing React Native, so on and so forth. But in this case, it's just kind of doing that basic DOM manipulation. Neat. All right, cool. All right, now this is where it gets neat. So prepare update is not a function. All right, interesting, right? What's kind of cool is, and we know this a little bit about how when we get hand wavy and explain how React works during our interviews, we know that something, I make changes, it happens in memory, something, virtual DOM, something, performance, right? And that makes sense. And we get hired as a senior principal engineer and life goes on, right? But it's kind of a cool idea, which is, okay, the props have changed, right? So prepare update gives you a chance to see hey, listen, based on these props changing, do I need to re-render anything, right? Maybe it was a hex color that went from all capital Fs to all lowercase f's. Okay, not a big deal, ignore it, right? Maybe it's not important in this case. So prepare update lets us write our own custom logic to figure out do we need to go to the DOM and do anything or not, right? If we return a falsy value, particularly undefined, right? Then React's done. All right, I don't need to do anything. I'm not even gonna try to put anything on it. I'm not gonna manipulate the DOM, I'm out of here. Should, on the other hand, be no, things changed, right? Commit update, which will be the next thing I get yelled at for, not spoiler alert, prepare. It's not surprising to you that just implementing a prepare update method was not gonna be the be all and end all here, right? I'm gonna implement prepare update, which is gonna figure out do we need to change stuff? And then if we need to change stuff, how do you actually go and manipulate that host environment? In this case, the DOM, in other cases, a PDF, Canvas, so on and so forth, right? So I'm gonna pull some out of the easy bake oven again, mostly just because I'm only gonna use 2 arguments, but my track record now for typing some of the more complicated ones is pretty bad. So the ones that we really care about are the old props and the new props. So I'm just pulling the unique from Lodash. You can be funny with sets and stuff like that if you really want to be. But we'll take all the keys that are in that object of new props that are coming in, all the keys that were in the old props that were in the previous rendition of this. This is that virtual DOM stuff that we all get really hand wavy about. And we're gonna go through all of them. If the old prop does not equal the new prop, cool, add it to the things that changed, right? So what's important here is that, let's say we had a whole bunch of attributes on there. Let's say there was a href that didn't change. Cool, we're gonna omit that from the payload. We're not gonna deal with that. We're not gonna deal with anything that didn't change. We're not gonna try, as if we were writing our own jQuery code, to go ahead and, all right, yeah, background color is still red. right? Because that's gonna, that's gonna theoretically trigger a re-render, and sure, could you optimize it? But the idea here is an algorithm that handles it for us. Like, okay, figure out the last time all the things that changed from this time, and then when we get to the commit phase, we'll only do those DOM manipulations in that case. So we'll go from the combined of all the keys inside of the old props and the new props, right? We'll go ahead, again, we're not ignoring our children, we're ignoring React's children. And if they don't match, cool, add that key to the payload that we're gonna pass the commit phase. And with, obviously we only care about the new prop because we're gonna manipulate the DOM to be the new thing. And if there is something in that array, then return the payload, otherwise return undefined. So the goal here is that, like, listen, if nothing changed, I don't want to change the DOM, right? I don't care to change the DOM. I don't want to do anything. I'm just basically comparing those two objects to figure out what changed, keeping track of only the new stuff. Now, obviously you can get really fancy here and do a whole bunch of other optimizations to make this more performant, but we're just trying to get the thing working at this point. Watching me tweak for, again, an hour and a half is not helpful for anyone. Cool. So we've got from the preparation phase, now we're moving on to the commit phase, which is, okay, the thing happened. Let's go ahead and manipulate those DOM nodes to do what needs to happen. Now, again, the reason React has a key property is in a lot of cases, it might have had to just remove DOM nodes or add DOM nodes. This is for, in the case that we have one that needed to change, how did it need to change, right? And, in the case of function components, I'm not using react.memo anywhere, right? So that is and frankly, because it's an input field and one piece of state, we would have had to put new event listeners every time anyway, because it would have been new functions in that case. Because even if I use react.memo, the one thing that was important is the thing that changed. So we'll go ahead and basically our commit phase is going to be almost effectively the same as our just initial adding one, because there's not a lot happening in here. So I'll just kind of add it in here as well. And so we've got the instance, which is the element in this case. I could have just renamed this element. I probably should have. We've got the instance, which is the current element. That update payload is whatever came out of the prepare update phase, right? So that object of that payload is what update payload is. And you still get access to the new and the old process, but the whole idea of prepare was to try to opt yourself out of needless commits, right? So you tried to get away from not doing that at all. You still have access to everything that you needed otherwise, and you kind of see. And so this is the same. We're going to that object.entries. I did it in the opposite order for some reason, which is, all right, if it's on change, we'll do that thing that swaps out the event listener. If it's on submit, swap out the event listener. Otherwise, treat it as a direct attribute that we write to the DOM. All right, so let's take a look and make sure, see where I got, and then we should have a working redone, except as you can see that now we've got everything in caps, because that is my one hill that I was willing to die on in my custom render, is that there's no way to have anything lowercase in here. So put that in and submit it. And so again, this is, the dumb, to-do application, right, that we've seen 1,000 times. But we did rewrite a a naively oversimplified version of React DOM.render to re-implement it from scratch. We no longer use the version in React. We built our own. Hopefully we learned a little bit about how reconciliation works in the process. So yeah. Whee! Questions, comments, concerns, cries of outrage.
Awesome.
So this is, I will put the repo up again for a second before I turn off the video share, and I can answer any questions as well. But I will push up, this was in the live coding branch I'm about to push up. There's a dry run, which is me practicing. And then obviously the document, the cheat sheet that I have is there as well as the notes from the slides. Cool. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can look at humans.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. Let's see. I just asked for questions on the YouTube dashboard here, but anybody else on the Zoom call have questions for Steve at the moment?
Victoria, how have you been pronouncing Twilio?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious too now.
Everybody has been calling it Twilo.
Okay. So here's the thing: when people just saw that, I'm like, oh my god, I hope I have not been pronouncing it wrong this entire time because I worked there and it'd be real awkward. But I had that like moment of existential dread.
Yeah, we use it for SMS. So
Questions for Steve? I'm not seeing any at the moment.
That's fine.
I guess I'm kind of curious, Steve. Like, what prompted you to dive into the reconciler like you have here, and are you using this at work, or what was the impetus for this?
So we never ever got like it was a tough call at work. So we got to the point where we had a proof of concept, right? But then the way that we do it now, like, so this was written for the old version of the marketing campaigns email editor, or at least the proof of concept was, right? But the how much can I say? Whatever. It's not like we're live streaming this to YouTube and saving it in posterity or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was like most legacy code bases was jQuery and CoffeeScript rewritten to React, and still used a lot of jQuery and stuff along those lines. It came to an interesting question of when you have to make the choice of, cool, this solves for our problems with comments, so on and so forth, but like, does that last mile of like implementing the rest of React DOM.render make sense? And my gut was no. Like, this is an interesting idea that kind of like got me into this. And this is one of those concepts that I'm pretty sure that like, if you look at like, yeah, there's like React TV and all these things. My hope was like, it's one of those things where once you understand it, you all of a sudden, like, there's a whole bunch of things you could solve with it. They're mostly like toy projects, right? Like, in fact, it was really funny as I was preparing for this. I wanted to do something a little bit more esoteric than rewriting React DOM. And most ridiculous things that I could think of were already implemented, right? Which is kind of cool. Like, the demo that I didn't end up doing, because again, it was implemented already, was one where you declare like a React like JSX object, and it writes to the file system, like in that tree structure. Right? So you can do file name as a prop, content as a prop, because like, I'm gonna be honest with you, like, I only at best can half remember. Like, I use Node's FS library just infrequently enough, right, that I don't ever really remember how to use it. Yeah. And so like, it'd be cool to just define the structure of like, here are the files I want with the MIME types and the file names and the content, and let a renderer just handle it for me, right? So like, there are a lot of things that like, those things exist because of this, right? But there's a lot of things like, hopefully you're like, oh, I could potentially solve a problem. Like, obviously the DOM is notoriously fickle. And so like, that being the hill you want to die on is probably fraught with peril, but right into the file system, that's a pretty containable problem, right? Taking, or if you had a whole bunch of React stuff, but you needed to draw one part to canvas, right? There's interesting things you could do there, right? And like, to target different platforms as well.
Nice. It's such a good reminder that React is so intuitive and can be used in many different ways. Like you touched on the React PDF and React Native, and there's just so many different flavors of it.
There's, I think I have it in like the further reading in the README, but there's like most things these days, there's like awesome. I'll add it there as well, but there is like awesome React or whatever list, which is like all the different things. Let me see if I can find it real quick. And I'll add it to this thing and push it up. Yeah.
So Donovan did have a question here while you're pulling that up, and I don't mean to distract you, but he was asking, is there a React for voice already that you know of, or could you see a voice renderer being a thing?
There isn't, like, not that I know of, right? Unless I quickly scroll through it. I did see like one of the conference talks demos is a MIDI one. I think Ken Wheeler did something interesting too. There has been so what I was kind of thinking about doing, we have at Twilio, we have Tweak, which is Twilio, I don't know, it's a hack week once a year. And so one of the things I've been playing around with is, so there's this language at Twilio called TWIML, right? Which is technically XML, right? And it's how you kind of can program the Twilio API. And I haven't figured out like what writing a React renderer would do to make this any better, because like it's pretty straightforward, right? Response, say hello. But I've been trying to think about like, could I write a React reconciler for having like bringing like a version of JSX to Twilio's Twiml that then spits out the resulting fact. So you could theoretically, and again, I didn't like, there was no intention here to plug Twilio. However, because the question came up for voice and or SMS, right? And it is a thing that I've been thinking about, right? There is, this is, you know, a way that you could do something like that to keep that like state in place.
Nice. Very cool. Were you able to find that link by chance?
Yeah, I had it up. There's another tab right here. And what I will do is I will put it in the README.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We'll make sure to get those slides shared and any of the links we talked about.
So yeah, the other cool one is there's one called Blessed is a node library for making terminal UIs. So there's a way to write terminal UIs in React. Again, some of the TV stuff. This was not what I thought it was, which I was going to be really excited for. There's clearly what I tried to do done a year or two later. So on and kind of so forth, right? Which is super cool.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I don't think, unless anybody has a final question here, I don't think I haven't had another one here on the chat. So
Put in here in the Zoom chat about would it be 3J or for the Canvas stuff? The answer of Canvas or like 3JS or what is yes. There's a lot of different, because again, like as long as you're willing to implement those methods, right? Like it can target literally anything, right? They've abstracted out the host environment from the like state management, props, context API stuff, right?
makes sense.
Cool.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Great work. Cool. Well, that pretty much. Oh yeah, Michael's got the emoji reactions up there, but that concludes the evening. So thank you so much to our presenters, Steve and Will. Two great talks tonight, and we'll let everybody get back to it. But if I think the plan moving forward here is to proceed with the next React Denver at Turing, unless you hear otherwise from us. We will be moving back to the third Tuesday of every month. We just switched it up this month for the holiday, but yeah, we'll go back to the regular schedule here. And yeah, hope to see you in April, but enjoy the rest of your evening. And thanks again for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Really awesome to see you all.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Steve.
See you.
Bye.
Bye all.